So, is a Canon R8 reliable enough for professional wedding cinematography? It just might be.
The sun is smiling. You feel like getting away. Get on the road. It's time to take it your way. The sky is smiling.
So, I was able to test this budget friendly Canon R8 at a wedding that I just did this past weekend down in St. Louis. It was a true test for this camera because, one, the ceremony was outside. It was 100 degrees, and I think the index may have been 110, 112, something like that. And you know, shooting at 60 frames per second, um, most of these Canon cameras, they're overheating. And this one also overheated, but it did not shut down. I definitely thought it was going to shut down, but it didn't. Luckily, it didn't. I did kind of play around with going back to 24 frames per second, and it was not blinking at all. I think it was at maybe the fifth or sixth bar, but switching over to 60 frames per second, um, it was flashing, but it continued to record without an issue, and it didn't shut off. After the ceremony, the bridal party did go right inside just to get out away from the heat, of course, to cool off before myself and the photographer took everyone out to do pictures and videos. The camera immediately cooled off. I think after about 3 or 4 minutes in, I turned it back on, went to 60 frames per second, and it was like it cooled off 30 or 40 degrees. I think the bar was maybe at 2 bars, which is nothing for this camera, and didn't have an issue. After it cooled off, I think we stayed inside for probably 10 or 15 minutes. Then we took the wedding party back outside. I didn't have an issue after that, with it. The photographer took the pictures, of course. I was just doing just a few shots of B-roll. And then I took the bride and groom and then the wedding party and did what I needed to do with them. Didn't have an issue with it overheating. The bar, it didn't come close to flashing or anything like that. So I was happy about that. But the initial conditions, at 100 degrees in direct sunlight, it did not handle that well. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is battery life. I know that's a big issue with everyone. And for me, it wasn't an issue. Why? Because I had two of these Artman batteries. I had never heard of them. When I purchased this camera from my friend, he had two of these and the charger along with the original Canon battery. So before I took this out to the wedding, I did a couple of photos. Actually did a full wedding with this camera with this battery, and it lasted, I think, all the way up until the end of the reception as far as photography. So what I thought was the Canon batteries, of course, will last a lot longer. And with these batteries, the downside, you don't know when they're low. The camera is just going to shut off. So what I decided to do was I took these two batteries along with two Canon batteries, and for the reception shots before everything started, I used one of these to do the reception, the guys getting dressed, the ladies getting dressed. So I ended up using the Canon battery for the entire ceremony, for the pictures and the video after the ceremony, and the entrance of the ceremony, or the entrance of the reception, and the speeches at the reception. After that, the Canon battery was blinking. So then I switched from that Canon battery to my second Canon battery to finish everything off. So at the end of the day, I went through three batteries. Two were, of course, the Artman batteries before going to the Canon battery towards the end of the day. I didn't have a problem with that. I kept a little pouch on the side, had these batteries in, so it wasn't an issue to switch batteries. I mean, I had it on my Ronin, and it took, 5-10 seconds to switch a battery. So battery life for me is not a deal breaker. It's not a big deal. When I was using my 6D Mark II to film weddings, I was taking three batteries, so it's not a big deal. Not that I was using all three, but I will always take all three just in case. So Um, it wasn't a deal breaker, and I kind of pretty much got these for free, and I think it did a pretty good job for me. So now we're going to move along to the memory card. Now, this seems to be a big deal breaker for most individuals. Me, I've never had a camera that actually had dual memory cards. So for me, I never cared. I never had a SD card issue. I've always used the best SD cards, and I'm glad I've done that. But I also haven't heard any issues of anyone else having card failure. So for me, it wasn't a deal breaker because I've never had a camera that had dual card slots. So I didn't care that this one didn't. I was just looking to get a camera that shot at 4K at 60 frames per second that wouldn't be so quick to overheat and that didn't have a crop. So the dual card slots, I didn't care anything about that. Now, one thing that I was so impressed with, and the ultimate reason why I'm so happy that I did pick up this camera, the quality, the 4K quality. I mean, with having C-Log, I'm coming from a 6D Mark II. If you're in that kind of same, camera range, and you go to something like this, it's a 9-day difference. You can't compare it. You can't compare it. The quality, the 4K, how you can push the colors, with the C-Log post-production, you can't beat the quality. Will I upgrade? I'm going to upgrade. Not this year, but probably next year. Why will I upgrade? Because it looks like I'm going to be doing a lot more weddings next year outside. And I don't want to have any type of issues with overheating. I don't want it to even be a thought that my camera is going to overheat shooting a wedding outside. Now, if it's been for years where I shoot all of my weddings, I think I've only shot 2 weddings since 2015 outside, then I wouldn't upgrade. But that does kind of scare me to possibly be in those situations, even again this year, because I have a couple weddings outside this year, but to be in a situation and the camera overheats and shut down, that's not an option. So I'm going to upgrade to the Canon R6 Mark II for that reason only. That's the only reason why I'm upgrading, because that camera seems to be way more reliable in high heat situations at 60 frames per second. So next year I definitely will be upgrading. I think I want to keep this to do my YouTube stuff. That's my take on this camera. If you're in a situation like me where you really couldn't afford, I think the camera is $2,500 after tax or something like that. Just know that if you have to shoot a ceremony outside, you may run into some issues. And keep in mind, I've done some work outside with this camera, just doing some real work, doing some work for some reels, and I didn't have an issue with it then. But again, this was maybe 70 or 80 degree weather, which is when I first picked up this camera, and I was outside with this camera probably an hour, messing around shooting. I didn't have an issue. But in high heat situations, direct sunlight, you're going to have an issue. So keep that in mind. Stay safe, keep shooting, be blessed.
Don't let them get away. You're on the road. Such a beautiful day. Such a beautiful day.
Will you keep your heart open to the needs of your marriage and make it the center point of your life together? Will you promise this today and for all the days to come? If so, answer, I do.
And I do.